So I've got 13 months of full-time work restoring this airplane. That's the finished look of it. A 1959 PA-18A model Super Cub that I restored for a brother I have out in California who was also born in '59. Anyway, here's what the airplane looked like when it arrived in Indiana, and it was all intact, but it was a 57-year-old airplane that still had the original cotton fabric and factory paint on it. So it needed a lot of love and a lot of care and attention. You can see here in the boot cowl, it was all beat up. The aluminum was same thing with the cowling, the nose bowl, just a lot of wear from a lot of life. So I hoisted the airplane up into a small workspace that I had to use, about the size of a two-car garage, and got started pulling everything out of the cockpit first, and then just pulling everything off of the airplane, the fabric, everything out of that fuselage, eventually getting it down to just a skeleton of tubing. And at that point, I did a bunch of STC modifications like this enlarged baggage door and a two-position rear seat, a lot of different modifications, getting all that welding done when the fuselage was all stripped down. Even added some float fittings so that floats could be put on the airplane in the future. And so after all that work was done, then I went ahead and sandblasted the fuselage and was getting it ready then for primer. So here it is with the primer on it and an all-new firewall test fit at this point in time just to see how it works. And then it was on to pulling that fabric off the wings and inspecting and doing whatever work was needed there. And check this out. This is the original markings from the factory worker on January 2nd, 1959, saying that this wing is okay, and it's marked as a PA-18A model. So just really cool stuff to see from the history of this airplane. I made some new leading edges for the wings out of aluminum, of course, and put new wood wingtip bows on. This airplane also has the Whip Air 2,000-pound gross weight upgrade kit, which includes some materials that go onto the rear spar in the wing. So anyway, I work alone, so covering the wings is a problem when you have to flip them over all the time. So I hung the wings with the leading edge down and did all the work with the fabric, the taping, the stitching, the taping, the painting, with the wings hanging in this one position, and it worked out fantastic. Here's another view with more of the fabric going on. You can see the second wing behind that and the fuselage behind that. The interior got completely redone, all new floorboards, moved the battery up underneath the front seat, and the side panels got covered with red leather to make it much nicer on the inside. And in fact, everything was coming out, as good as new or maybe even better than new at times. So I was real happy with the look of everything there. Here's the fabric going on the fuselage. It's the Stewart system, and that worked out really well. Fabric is shrunk, the interior is pretty well done, and this picture coming up here is awesome because this shows both wings and the fuselage. They are stitched and taped, and everything's basically ready to start the spraying process. And in that nice little small space that I worked in, it worked out really well. So there's the first coats of the fill on the fabric, and then moving on to some Daytona white for the base coats. And then did a bunch of course, taping and the masking for the N number and getting ready to spray that red paint. So there goes the layer of red paint on it. And then the fun part comes when you pull all that off and you can see what things look like. And wow, it looked fantastic. I was really happy with the look of everything. At that point, I moved the airplane to another hangar where I'd be able to put the wings on, fabricated an all-new boot cowl out of aluminum for it, and then eventually got the wings mounted and got prepped to put the engine back onto the airframe. I also did a whole bunch of work on the interior with redoing all of the lettering, and that was a lot of fun, unique project. Put in a new instrument panel with all new, overhauled instruments. And then here is the engine finally back on the airframe. And then after that, I got some paint onto the boot cowl and start working on the cowling. So all the pieces are finally starting to come together. And then I moved to another hangar location where I could really get the project finished up. And if you look between the flaps here on the fuselage, you can see that hopper door and the flat top fuselage that makes an A model Super Cub different than most Super Cubs. This could be used as a crop duster. You could pull the rear seat out and put a hopper in, and you'd fill that hopper through that door there on the top of the fuselage. So here we are now, finally starting to look like a real airplane. It's almost all there. In fact, I went ahead and rolled it outside in the sun, even though it wasn't quite done, just to see what it looked like. I was really happy, and it was very encouraging to see it at that point. So started prepping for the annual inspection and doing the weight and balance. So here we're getting ready to weigh the airplane. And after all that, here is a finished airplane, and that's the first day that I flew it right there. I was very happy. It flew fantastic. In fact, there it is in the air a little bit later, and that was all in July of 2018. So shortly thereafter, flew it up to Oshkosh and had a great time. My brother actually met me up there, and we were prepping then to fly to California after that. But before we left for California, actually wound up winning a really nice award up there at Oshkosh. So that was pretty darn awesome. So there she is, a 1959 PA-18A model, looking like new, and what a fantastic project. So cool to be a plane saver